Welcome to Tapping Wisdom. I'm Sue Padernacht, and I'm delighted to be here with Dean Ian Williamson, the new Dean of the UC Irvine Merage School of Business. I recently met Dean Williamson after he became Dean on January 1st, 2021, when he did a school-wide presentation for the business school. And I was fascinated by his approach to leadership and thought he would be a fantastic guest for us to talk to about leadership and how that applies to not just a storied and very successful already institution, but also the community in which it sits. So welcome, Dean Williamson. I'm wondering if you might introduce yourself to our audience.
Well, one, thank you very much, Sue, for having me join you today. I really appreciate it. I can maybe give a little bit of background. I'm originally from Chicago. That's my hometown. My family, for the most part, still lives there. But since being raised there, I've sort of had a very interesting journey. As it turns out, I'm actually speaking to you right now from New Zealand. Which is interesting given that I'm the Dean of a business school in California, but because of COVID, I spent the last 3.5 years in New Zealand where I was the Dean of another business school, but was unable to relocate in December as planned because of COVID. And so started remotely, which is a very interesting leadership journey in and of itself, and have been doing that ever since. But previously, I lived in New Zealand for 3.5 years. Prior to that, spent some time in Indonesia, where I worked at the University Institut Teknologi Bandung there. And prior to that, I was in Australia for 10 years, where I was at the University of Melbourne Business School. And so I've had a really interesting experiences in being able to work with some really phenomenal, talented individuals in a wide variety of settings. In addition to being an academic, I've also been able to use my research skill sets to support and work with many different companies around the world, which has given me a chance to do work with organizations in over 25 different countries, which has been a phenomenal experience. And as I reflect upon that journey, it seems like never would have envisioned many of those things, if not any of those things growing up in Chicago, but it really does speak to how wonderful the opportunities can be when you've been fortunate enough to have an educational experience. And certainly my ability to get my undergraduate degree and later my PhD opened those doors for me. And so it's been fantastic.
It's a really wonderful story. Thank you for sharing that. And when we had a chance to chat the other day, you were talking about how the vast amount of experiences has really informed your theory of leadership. So I'm wondering if you can share with our audience what that is and what your experiences have been, and then how what you're thinking 2 months in to the role, what your thinking is so far for the Merage School of Business.
Well, I guess historically there's always been this big argument in leadership around whether or not leaders are born or leaders are made and things of that nature. And I guess looking at my own experience, but also as an academic looking at the research, the perspective I've adopted is leadership is always contextual. So there is no absolute forms of leadership. It is always contextual. And the way I think about it is there's the leadership opportunity. So, you have to have there has to be a need for leadership. You just can't walk in a room and say, I'm going to lead now. There has to be a reason for it. And then there's the way in which you realize that opportunity. And whenever I've looked at organizations in defining that opportunity space, I always sort of say, let's think about what this organization could be, what we'd like to accomplish, our goals that we have for tomorrow. Let's think about where we are today. And that gap in between where we would like to be and where we are today, that's the leadership opportunity. How can I, as an individual, or as a collection of leaders, get a group of people, an organization, from A, where they are right now, to B, where we aspire to be given our mission, our goals, our aspirations. And sometimes that gap is pretty small, sometimes that gap is pretty big. And a lot of the work that I've done with organizations over the last several years has really been helping leaders in that organization feel the gap as they're dealing with major disruptions. So sometimes it's digital disruption in terms of, we provided a certain set of services and we've been disrupted because of technology or competitors. How do we go from this space where we are today to this other place where we really believe we will be better and we'll be able to provide a better service outcome? Most recently, the last 12 months, it's been a pandemic, right? And helping organizations understand the pandemic is all types of constraints and challenges for us, but it has also made us realize there's spaces that we previously didn't think were possible for us to play in that we can. And if I think about higher education, it's really forced us to think about, wow, we can provide a world-class education to pretty much anyone, anywhere in the world right now. And that was not something we would have conceptualized not even 12 months ago. And so how do, as a leader, I help us get through that space? So that's first and foremost, recognizing that's the opportunity. And that opportunity is always contextual, right? You have a purpose at a place and a time with a specific group of individuals, and you as a leader have to think about how can I be adapted to that place. In some cases, that means you're not the right person for leadership. Just because you were successful in a leadership role in a previous setting doesn't mean you're useful in that context. And I think it's being honest and not having a sense of pride about that, but just understanding you're there to serve. And so what you'll see is that for me, the second part of this is that I view leadership as service, that I have a very strong servant leadership orientation, and that it's about understanding how you can work with a group of individuals, that you can remind them of their principles, their values, but take into consideration their personalities and their needs, and allow that group to get to where they're trying to achieve, what they're trying to accomplish. And part of that is directive, right? In the more traditional sense of what we think of as leadership. Part of that is coaching, in the sense that you're reminding individuals of the aspirations that they set for themselves, not necessarily that you set for them. And that your job there is to facilitate them getting there and sort of balancing that spot. So it's understanding what the opportunity is, and then appreciating that leadership is 100% contextual. You got to be the right person for that situation at the time. And sometimes that means you adapt as a leader, but sometimes that means you opt out and you say, I'm not the person for this role. There's other people who have other skill sets that are better situated for this time, this place, and this group of individuals.
Gosh, there's so much to unpack there. But I do want to focus on what is in front of us. So given the opportunity and the context here at UCI Merage School of Business, what opportunities and what context are you seeing here?
My goal is for us to increase access to a world-class education. That's the goal I have for us as an institution. And for me, I think that's really critical. That will be the foundational touch point we will always come back to. How can we take this fantastic collection of expertise that we've accumulated over decades, both through individuals, but also just our routines and our practices? How can we make that more available to more members of our community? Because I know, without any doubt, that whenever we're able to do that, it has a very positive impact on individuals and has a very positive impact on broader communities. So given that that's our goal, and we're coming out of a context of COVID, what does that mean? Well, what we've realized is that we should probably broaden out the consideration set of who we think are our students. That some of our students will be individuals that are going to come to Irvine, and they're going to get a chance to spend time in our wonderful building. Some of these are individuals who are only occasionally going to come to Irvine, or maybe never come to Irvine, but they will still get great value out of the educational experiences that we can create. And so how do we realize that opportunity of expanding access to world-class education, in the sense that some of the constraints we previously felt we had, it was difficult to get people here, we only had so much room for so many individuals, are really no longer constraints because of how we think about digital technology and how we've had shifts in the preferences of our students and the broader culture. And that's the aspiration. That's one part of it. The second part of this is, I think we should embrace our role as an institution in society that is about enhancing and changing society. I think universities, if they so choose, can be one of the most powerful agents of change in any community. I certainly have seen this and been a part of this in multiple different communities around the world. And so that's about us honing in our understanding of what are the critical social issues that our communities are dealing with. How can we as an educational institution do what we do best, which is come up with innovative solutions. We're the R&D community entity of society. This is why we do research. Come up with innovative solutions to those issues, but then also help with the implementation of them. And we do that through the capacity development that we provide through our educational experiences. And so it's really linking into, it's not just the business aspects of what is driving, say, Orange County or Southern California or California more broadly, but it's also the social components that are wrapped around those commercial activities. And so if you think about issues around the digital economy, it's also appreciating that the digital economy carries with it concerns and challenges around how can we as a business school ensure that the digital economy generates benefit collectively by overcoming digital divide issues around employment or governance or services. That has to be part of our story as well. And if we do that, the community will certainly reward us and see us as an important and relevant institution.
I would like to connect a couple of dots that you mentioned. So you talked about the digital economy and digital transformation, and also some of the social issues, right? The critical social issues of our community. So one of the things that we know is connecting those two together is access to digital capability, in the first place, which is not just global. I mean, it's here in Orange County and in California as well. Can you talk to that a bit as well?
Well, I think if you think about digital tools, they are just that, they're tools, right? And so like every tool, its impact, it was always shaped by the people who use them, the crafts people. And, one of the realities we've seen is that as we've had success with the digital economy, many of the existing challenges that we already had in society have been exacerbated. So we know that there's tremendous underrepresentation of ethnic minorities, Black, Latino, Latinx community in those domains in terms of the workforce. We know that there's even lower representation for certain communities and certain genders at senior leadership roles in these organizations. We know that certain communities have benefited tremendously from access to digital tools and digital services, while other communities unfortunately have not. And the services, while they could be used to address challenges in those communities, have not been oriented to do so because the companies did not have the knowledge or the orientation to think about those communities. And those issues, if they are left unchecked, are not just damaging for society, but they represent huge constraints for the growth of the digital sector as a commercial activity. They will have problems getting talent. They will run out of ideas about new service delivery. They will be less innovative. They will likely take on greater scrutiny from society. As you see now with how people think about data security, utilization of data and the various things, they will not have trust. And so there's a place for us as a business school to both help leaders think about commercial models that they're going to develop, but also help those same leaders understand that as you do this, you're doing it embedded in a community and a society that has expectations of you. How then as a leader do you balance those requirements and making sure that you are both successful commercially, but also maintain that broader social license to operate?
That's right, and that's filling that gap, right? To close the gap between the A and the B, as you were talking about in terms of the vision.
Exactly.
So in terms of the Orange County community, there's been a lot of buzz about, the new dean. There always is when there's a new dean of the business school at UC Irvine. So what is exciting you kind of going forward about, what you're seeing so far? And, again, more context and community, but like, as you've been getting to know the business community, the faculty, the leadership, etc. So what's kind of got you getting up in the morning and going, life is good?
Yeah, well, to some extent, it's a reaffirmation of some of the things that I hoped were there before I started. You kind of start a job thinking there's some things that you hope you'll see. And the things that attracted me were Orange County is, innovation. It's just, you talk to people who are in companies and they're based in Orange County and affiliated with Orange County, and they're really doing cutting edge things, whether it be in the computer software domain, whether it be in healthcare, whether it be in aviation. You really see examples of things that nobody else in the world is doing. And it's exciting to be around that space. Similarly, within a university, many of those ideas are coming out of the university, some in the business school, some in the other areas. And so, what's exciting to me is that I have this great privilege of working with world-class researchers who are consistently pushing the envelope in terms of our understanding of the environment that we're in, but also shaping our perspectives as to what is possible, not just in a business domain, but also more broadly at a societal level. And, really speaks to, the ethos that UCI has had around how it's invested and supported research over the years, because I really think that allows us to have a foundational, if you like, thought leadership role, which is really important. And I think the other thing that really stood out for me is the diversity of the perspectives and experiences and cultures and backgrounds that exist within Orange County. It's an extraordinarily diverse community, and equally important to that is the desire to embrace that, to make that part of their identity, to celebrate that. And we know very clearly over the last several years that Orange County, like almost every other part of the world, has really struggled with this idea around what does it mean to form a organization or be in a community that truly celebrates, embraces diversity in all its various shapes and forms. And had it not been for a pandemic, we'd probably be starting off most of our conversations talking about the Me Too movement or Black Lives Matter, right? Two huge social movements that are global in every sense of the word, that have really challenged a lot of the foundational assumptions that we have. And I'm really happy and excited that, at UCI, there's a desire to have a very clear conversation about that. And in fact, provide some leadership in that space. So those are the things that excited me to come. And certainly since I've been here, I've not been let down. They continue to be the things that I think are just tremendous opportunities for us.
That's so inspiring. And somebody who is finishing my 16th year of teaching at the university as a member of the adjunct faculty, I have not just seen changes within the school and within the university, but also within Orange County. It's not only it has not only become more diverse, but you're seeing many more voices be elevated. It seems like it's still early days. You still open up publications, and when you see people being celebrated, the faces still seem to look like they always have. They tend to look like mine, right? So I think the good news and the thing that is exciting is that there is awareness and there is intention. So as you were saying, is you've got to convert that into action. We now know where the gap is. We've got to convert that into action. So what kind of is your vision, or what are your hopes and dreams for the kind of impact you'd like to make at a school, university, county, state, whichever level you would like to pick? I'm just kind of interested in like where your vision and dreams are for this.
Well, I think if I look at the capacity that we have as an institution, University of California Irvine and Paul Merage School of Business, we have a tremendous resource base. Just the intellectual and social capital, human capital capability of this institution is really phenomenal. By every measure you can think of, we're a world-class education institution. And so because of that, and because we've done a lot of work to become that, I think our aspirations should be global. So if you ask me who are the people that I think we would like to impact, I would say, well, we should be thinking about global audiences, because we have the resource base to seriously think about that. And we've attracted talent from all around the world to be able to say something like that. So it's definitely within our realm of possibility. And then what is the way we would do that? Well, I would say, well, let's build this thing from the outside in. So if we want to have a global audience, then we need to be focusing on questions and issues and challenges that are globally relevant to a wide variety of communities. So if I bring up this issue around digital divide, and how do we enhance digital inclusion so that we do not have segments of society that feel left behind or are not equally participating or contributing to the growth of the digital economy, that's a conversation that's relevant, not just in Southern California. I could go to Indonesia and that's relevant. I can go to China and that's relevant. I can go to Rwanda and that's relevant. And so we should be having aspirations to focus on those types of problem sets. If we were going to focus on how can we use technology to enhance delivery of healthcare, such that we're able to provide world-class healthcare. And that's a science issue, that's a medicine issue, but it's also, if you like, a management issue. There's a place for us as a business school to contribute to that conversation. If I was to talk about what are the ways in which we can develop organizations that actually embrace and start off with the fundamental assumption of inclusiveness, right? Because one of the challenges we have right now is many of the organizations that are struggling with this, the foundational pillars of how they started was not based on the notion of inclusiveness. And what does that actually mean from a management perspective and from a business model perspective? We have the ability through the scholarship and the capability that we have to actually be a thought leader in that domain and help leaders around the world shape that. So my first start is to say, let's think about what are some of the major big social issues that we know society is going to be dealing with over the next 5 to 10 years. How can we orient our capability as an educational institution through our research, through our programming, through our outreach to provide leadership in that domain? And then from there, What are the gaps? How do we be effective at that? And how do we backfill those gaps? So that's my aspiration. It's kind of big, I guess, but I think it's also quite important.
Yeah, quite important, and we want to be thinking big, right? And so in support of thinking big, what partnerships do you see would be most important for us? And you can think of any level, right? At the school, county, state, global. What are some kind of key partnerships that you think will be good enablers for these dreams and for these aspirations to become real?
Well, at a very tactical level, I think if you're dealing with a complex problem, whatever it may be, a social problem, a technology problem, whatever, ultimately it's a story about innovation. So the answers to complex problems are always new innovations. And if I look at the research on this, because I go back to the scholarship, what we know is that most innovations are actually created by the combination of different skills. It's the bringing together, not of new things, but of existing things, but combining them in a way that they've previously not been combined. That is the way in which most organizations have successfully developed technology or other forms of innovation. And I think that's the model we should be using as well. And I can reflect on some personal experiences where I've worked in business schools where we've had to, try to take on very complex issues. So in Australia, it was thinking about ways, how can we enhance economic well-being for the Aboriginal community, the Aboriginal Torres Strait Island community, the indigenous population of Australia. Now that's a huge complex issue. And there's many different facets to that, ranging from health outcomes to employment to wealth. But one of the areas that we thought at a very tactical level will make a big difference was how can we, in doing this, how can we support indigenous entrepreneurship, the creation of businesses by indigenous members of community. That is a way to actually improve wealth, employment, self-determination, and a whole host of flow-on effects. It doesn't solve everything, but it is a very powerful mechanism. Now, to do that requires a few things. If I'm going to come up with a new way to spark change in indigenous entrepreneurship, what would I need to have? Well, it helps to have a business school. We're really good at teaching people how to run businesses, so that's check, we can do that. But we need to have community support, right? We need to have an understanding that the community is willing to partnership with the business school to identify both the current and prospective entrepreneurs, to encourage them to use our services. It helps if you're going to create a business for the business to have a set of clients, right? And so one of the things we worked with was, well, maybe we can work with industry who might be using these businesses for their procurement needs, right? And so large Australian companies, for example. If you want to do this, it's probably not just useful to do it in, say, one part of the country. You probably want to make sure that this is a national activity. And so who is the organization that thinks nationally? Well, it typically is the government. And so what we ended up doing in that particular situation was a partnership between the business school, several not-for-profit organizations that were part of the community that had expressed interest on economic development goals for indigenous community in Australia, several large major companies, which had a desire to have a procurement system, or if you like, a supply chain that was able to bring in indigenous companies, and a government agency that had explicit interest around how to enhance economic development for indigenous community. And so here we are as a business school running an educational intervention that is supported by these three different areas. And I should also note that to start all of this off, we actually had to lean on and draw support from philanthropy. So somebody who was willing to take a risk on this. And so we had, 5 different segments of society, all with different motives, but all being able to coalesce around a particular thing of what would it look like if we were able to increase the success of indigenous businesses in this country. And that would generate tax revenue for the government, that would generate procurement opportunities for companies, that would generate self-determination and wealth in the community. It would generate a new source of students for us as a business school. All of us had maybe different things that we were going to get out of it, but all of us saw this solution was going to be equally useful for all of us. And I think that's the way I would want us to be thinking about this as the Paul Merage School.
Absolutely.
That if we were to talk about those issues, who were the other partners that we would engage with?
And what would you say were the biggest constraints or obstacles that you needed to overcome in that situation? And how did you do that? Or at least how did you minimize them?
Well, yeah, I think first and foremost, you start off with the notion that a lot of people are going to be interested, but you're going to get a lot of false positives, right? So there's a little bit of a war of attrition in any partnership. And that's whether you're dating or whether you're trying to find a business partnership. It's just not everyone that you think is going to be the one is right. Be patient around that. And part of that is making sure that you're willing to go out and talk to people, really refining the language that you're using to explain what you're trying to accomplish so that you're not misunderstood. And so once you're able to kind of get that group of people who I think understand what you're trying to accomplish and see value in it, then you have to also do the next step, which is understand that the people who sit down at the table don't all have to sit down at the table for the same reason. So one of the big things that causes an issues with partnership is that people kind of feel like, well, you're being instrumental. You're not doing it for the same reason as I am. And it's like, well, that's fine. Everybody here has a different mission. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there's an overlap in the goal that we're trying to accomplish, and that this activity could be beneficial for all of them, right? And really working through, and I actually think what's really important is to go one step further, is to be very explicit about how every party will benefit specifically from this activity. While I think there is a space for benevolence, I actually think what we find for sustained long-term interventions, you have to actually have the various parties see value in what's going on for themselves, right? So it was important for me to talk to the companies about, how will this help you in your supply chain? How will this help you in terms of getting contracts with government agencies that would like to see a diverse supply chain? That should be part of the conversation. If it's the indigenous community, how will this help you in your advocacy work, right? That we shouldn't shy away from that we know that businesses play an important role in helping communities in their advocacy work. Right? And sometimes that advocacy might actually be against other entities. Okay, so be it. But how will we do that? If it's the government, I think it's okay to say, how will this help you in terms of shoring up your tax revenue, reducing your expenditures? Like, we need to be able to talk about it in a manner that is actually real for the various parties. And sometimes that's not so easy as well, but you have to have that as part of the discussion.
Absolutely. So what is kind of a really important kind of a message for the UCI, the Orange County, like for our community locally to take from all of this? Like what is the message, and what would you like for us to be thinking about to support you in accomplishing these things?
Well, I'll go back to my personal why, and I won't ever shy away from that. I think our goal at the end of the day is to increase access to a world-class education. And we're going to have a whole bunch of complications that come along the way, and there's going to be a bunch of different perspectives about how we do that, but that has to always be the thing that allows us to collectively go on this journey together. And that means, we will always want to make investments in the quality of our research, the quality of what we're providing as an educational tool. But we also have to always be asking that question, well, who's here? How can we support them? And who's not here? Why are they not here? Right? And be very open to always asking that question. And I think one of the things that I would like for us to be doing as an organization is to get into the routine where we're openly and comfortably having those types of conversations. I think the other thing I would say is, it's okay for us to have a big ambition. We'll tactfully, we'll eat the whole thing one bite at a time. We're not going to swallow it all at once. But, let's not forget that I think we have a resource base in terms of the caliber of people that we have that allows us to take on some pretty big questions. And we should be okay to doing that. And then I think the final thing is, just going back to that leadership question that you asked, is that as we go along this, there's going to be opportunities and needs for certain people to step up at certain times. And what I find about, and what I love about the Academy and what I love about our profession is that by and large, people get into this because they really get captivated with ideas and impact. And, it'd be great if we as an institution were able to provide a space for people to step up in those points in time where it made sense for them, where at that time, at that place with those people, they're the best person to lead. And people feeling comfortable and confident that they can do that and that they have the support. And that means support from me, but also encouragement from their peers. So those are some takeaways that I think will be really good. They'll serve us well as we deal with some of the complexities. I don't want to paint it too rosy of a picture. We're in a very, very tumultuous period of time, but it has created a tremendous opportunity. I can think of no time in history where our educational institution is more needed than now.
Absolutely. And I think because we're at a moment where we're starting to see, and I don't want to overuse a term that's out there, but the term green shoots is probably really quite applicable with COVID rates going down, with all of the color ratings, right? We're going from purple to red, starting to go in the right direction. Some people can see each other again. So we're starting to see things, you know, the light at the end of the tunnel. We're not there yet. People are probably getting antsy at this point, right, for it to just be here. So it does not seem so far-fetched to be leapfrogging to that moment, right? Because it's really only months away. It's not an unknown number of months or years away, right? We can quantify it now. So, you know, that's why I thought this would be such a great moment to speak with you about this, because especially even since January, things have gotten so much better from that perspective. You know, as you would say, you know, we're not out of the woods yet. You know, we have other things that we need to get through, but we're getting close. So before I close, I do want to ask you one more question. Is there anything that I haven't asked that that you would like to say, or that would be important for people to know?
Well, that's a good question. I think you know, if I reflect, so it's been about a year, almost a year to the week, since really COVID took hold globally, right? You had the WHO declare a pandemic, you had countries begin to shut down, and you know, in that period of time, it's been a very, very, very full 12 months, and it really has caused a lot of us to just think differently about everything that's going on in our life. Every aspect of our life, in some way, shape, or form, has been changed, and I guess the challenge that I have for myself, and certainly what I would love to people to be thinking about is, in all of this, in what has truly been a crisis and truly, you know, a sad tragedy around the loss of life and everything, there is a space now for us to rethink the narrative, right? We've had to reboot just because, and now we have a chance to sort of ask ourselves, what are we going to reboot to? And I think as we do that, I really would want people thinking around, you know, I guess the question is, what would you like that narrative to be? We've talked a lot about inclusive and diversity. What does the narrative look like? Well, that's the heart and soul of what we actually go about doing. We've had a lot of commentary about what does sustainability look like more broadly. What does it look like if that's the narrative that we actually start our conversation with? We've had a lot of discussion around the way we focus on education and access and the things. What does it actually mean if we start off with an assumption of access? We've had to reboot as a society, period. We had to. Now we can reboot and go right back to what we were doing, or we can reboot and start the narrative with a very different set of assumptions. And I think that's the challenge that individually I certainly want to take on, but I guess that's the broader question that I think is really important for us as a community to be dealing with. And if we can open up that space, I think it unlocks a lot of great potential for us.
Well, thank you so much, Dean Williamson. It's been such a pleasure and an honor to be speaking with you about this and just kind of what's top of mind for you. It almost seems as if I were to speak with you again, there would be so much more, you know, to talk about. Is there any sense of when you might be joining us in Orange County? As much as staying in New Zealand sounds lovely.
No, I actually want to get to California. That was the goal.
Yeah.
I did kind of take a job in California to actually live in California. So
Exactly.
yeah, I'm looking forward to that. You know, I don't know yet. You know, one of the things that, you know, there's still some restrictions associated with non-essential travel. My assumption is that as things improve, that'll be lifted. And once that's lifted, you know, there'll be a plane with my name on it. And I'll be looking forward to getting over there.
So it's the same thing as we've been saying. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, but you know, we know it's coming. It's just not defined yet.
Yeah, you know, I don't look at the end of the tunnel. I just look at the small positive steps.
Nice.
You know, I think if you can kind of, if you can hold on to the fact that, you know, small positive steps always get you where you're going to go, then there's a lot of reason to be optimistic. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. Positive steps.
Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be on faculty and to be joining on this ride and to be part of whatever it means to contribute to the accomplishments. I know for me personally, you know, teaching isn't a trade, it's a calling. So, you know, I love watching my students grow and thrive, and to the opportunity to be part of expanding that, you know, within the county, state, national, international community is just really, it's really thrilling. Thank you. For those who would like to reach out to you or reach out to the Merage School, what would be the best way for people to do that?
Well, I'm certainly on LinkedIn. I'm certainly on Twitter, and you can reach out to me there. You probably can quickly Google Ian Williamson Merage School, and you'll find my website and my email and all that. But I certainly would encourage individuals, if they have thoughts about how the Merage School can play a meaningful role in supporting their organization, or if they have interest in some of the programs, please feel free to reach out to me. It will never be a hardship for me to talk about the great things that we're doing at the Merage School, and how that might be expanded based on some partnerships we might form.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dean Williamson. And
Right.
is our episode of Tapping Wisdom, talking with Dean Ian Williamson from the University of California, Irvine. Thank you.
My pleasure.